And this was at least 12 to 15 feet from top to bottom. Just an unbelievably attractive display. I don't know how they got it there, but it was really, really a nice display. It makes you want it even more. But the pendula has what they call positive geotropic stolons. These stolons grow downward rather than oblique and horizontal, generally. Now, I don't know who decided on those things because mine do the same thing both ways. They come out sideways. And if you're not careful, they come out of the pot's holes. They do all kinds of crazy things. And then you just have to wait till they're big enough. But they're found, again, in the upper canopy of the trees. They're found generally in Ecuador, but all through that Amazon basin. They have the thin leaves, the short and long combinations, pink to a red center at blooming time. I don't know if you know Stephen Littlefield. I'm sure you've seen his T-shirts if you've been into it. He's in the St. Pete area, and this was a painting that he made of his pendula in his backyard. And now it's the only heliacum that I have that has no particular cultural problems. It's in my den on the wall, and it does just great. Occasional dusting, but it reminds me of my heliacum, and he does a fantastic job with all this stuff. And I was fortunate to get this from him. There are two varieties of pendula. One of them is Pendula brevifolia, and it's the one that we see more often, and I think one of the extremely attractive forms. This is a small one. It's really, I consider it the best form. It reacts well to most light conditions. As it gets more light, it keeps more of the darker colors in it. And it also can take the cold fairly well. It doesn't just turn its toes up and die when it gets down to 50. It gets unhappy as it gets a little colder. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But it reacts well to fertilizer and abundant water. It kind of stays small and tight when it's grown hard. And that's the way I prefer it. When you grow it with a lot of fertilizer, it starts getting longer leaves. So it just depends on what you like. There's reports from Loreto, Peru, that what they'll do down there is take the whole plant and boil it. And then they take that decoction and drink it for improved general health. Now, I know a lot of you know Pepe or Jose Deneri from Fort Lauderdale. I know he talked to you all about Bill Burgess one time. And those of you that stayed awake probably remember. I just happened to be here for that. Pepe's a real close friend of mine. But he's also a doctor from Peru. He got to be a doctor in Boston, but he's still from Peru and spends a lot of time down there. And I asked him if he ever prescribed it. And he did say that he had heard of it, but he had never prescribed that boiling the pendulas and then drinking it as far as taking care of people. The second form is Pendula variety pendula. It has a little bit wider leaves, a little more color in the leaves than brevifolia, and it's a little bit larger plant, slightly more open form. There are variegated varieties and albomarginated varieties that have been found in the wild and cultured. If you've got your imagination on, you can see some different variegation in these leaves. And I've got it as an example we'll look at that you can really tell. But this is another variegated pendula, which is really a neat plant. And again, it grows quite well in our conditions. So they're attractive, they're nice, the whole group. The last one is a little bit different. It's Neoregelia terrapotoensis. And it doesn't look exactly like the others. It's apple green with the purple spots and splotches on it. But the other characteristics that it has are really closer to this Egmea I showed you, the plant that had been moved, Aculetusepala. It looks a lot closer to the Teratopotensis. So some of the botanists, like I said, want to move the whole Heliacum into Egmea. Others want to make Heliacum a different genus. So what'll happen, who knows, maybe nothing. Maybe they'll stay where they are. Maybe somebody will think Teratopiensis needs to go to Egmea, or Aculetusepala needs to go back to Heliacum. We all just have to wait with bated breath. This shows you sort of a different look. All of these are Teratopiensis. Some of them have a lot of purple, some of them have a lot of spots, some of them don't have much purple, some of them are mostly green. They're all growing within 6 feet, of each other. So they do different things. It just depends on what conditions you've got them in and what you've done with them. These are highly endemic plants primarily to this one region. And as such, we don't see a lot of hybrids with the Heliacum. Nowadays, back when I started judging, I knew all the hybridists worldwide, of them, if I didn't know them personally. I knew what they were doing, I knew what they had done, I knew a lot of the plants. Now it's totally impossible when I go to judge a show, especially a world conference, which, don't forget, is in Hawaii next year, and you should be saving your quarters for that. Or maybe you better save your $10 bills. The quarters may not make it. But when you go to a world conference and see plants out of your area, it's hard to know them, because nowadays anybody with 2 blooming neos is trying to put them together and make a hybrid and grow out 40 seeds and have 40 different plants and then not know what to do with them. But since they lived with them for 5 years, they decided they're going to do something with them. So we see a lot, and we see a lot of really neat hybrids that we never saw before. But in the Heliacum, they hybridize very well between each other, these 10 species. And I think that the bulk of most people's collections now are probably hybrids of these species rather than the individual species themselves, because they're starting to look so very much alike that it's hard to differentiate them. But you don't see many hybrids with the other subgenera of the Neoregilias. Now, one of them that we do see that's in the literature is Neoregelia bonita. And that's a cross Carol Johnson made back in 1976. And it's Erythropetala crossed with Morrisoniana. I never got a chance to talk. I spent many, many hours with Carol and Jeff before they passed away down at the Pineapple Place and Lake Mary, and just loved all the time I spent there. And if you knew Carol, you listened, because she talked. There was no doubt about that. And we talked about a lot of things that got crossed in her greenhouses. And I'm not totally convinced that the gene pool of the Erythropetala got into this. It doesn't have a lot of the characters you might think it should. This is another one. This is Neoregelia bromanza. It's an Australian cross. I've never seen it in the States, and I don't know if it left Australia or if it even still exists. It's supposed to be Lilliputiana crossed with Pendula. It doesn't look like it has one character of either of those parents to me. And that's, there are some people that think maybe when you try to cross a different subgenus with the Heliacum, that it forces self-fertilization rather than taking on other pollen. I don't know genetically exactly how that would happen, although Don Beadle and I talked about that occurring in some of his Bilbergia hybrids in the past. So I don't know, but I just don't see it. Another Australian hybrid is Sharon's Delight. This one is a cross between Farinosa and Wardachii. Again, though, I just don't see a lot of Heliacum characters. Now, they may all be recessive, but I would have my doubts. Going to some real crosses. This is one that Chester Skotak did from Costa Rica, Neoregelia brown recluse. It's a cross of Pendula crossed with Eleptropedala variety bicolor. I don't think there's any doubt about that because it's really kind of neat. The young pups are plants grown without a lot of light, are green, and then they'll go on and start to color up. And it's really a very attractive plant. Small plant, about that size, and I'll show you one in a minute. But real attractive. Heavily fertilized, grown in low light. I think it loses some of its attractiveness, but that's the eye of the beholder. If you're into big, then you can enjoy that. But it makes a nice group of plants. And most of the Heliacum have an unusual character. The pups will come off, they'll be elongated, then the stolon will get longer, and then they might bloom real small, or they might just go ahead and grow up and bloom later. I've seen 3 or 4 or 5 different age or size plants hanging off of the mother plant, all of them blooming at the same time. No particular thing triggered it, and it's not a maturity thing. Another one is pink spider, and it has more of a pink bloom than brown recluse, but the leaves don't get as much color. It's a Pendula crossed with Eleptropedala. Now these are pups of a really, really neat plant. This is a plant that Chester Skotak, and if you know Chester, you know his sense of humor is extremely unusual. But this is Neoregelia ludicrous. It's a notable hybrid of Pendula variety brevifolia crossed with Eleptropedala, and then that crossed back with Eleptropedala again. But you can't knock the plant. This is a beautiful thing. It is really so neat. And I've already had several offers from mine back there that I'll show you. But it's a real eye catcher and a beautiful plant that could deserve a place in everybody's collection. And real highlight, it just gets so red instead of pink that you might want to give it a little less light and let the pink come out. The pink and green and white all together makes a really nice show. Another plant that's a cross is done by R.L. Fraser. It's Neoregelia morona. Now remember the species we talked about was Moriana. This is morona. It's a Pendula variety brevifolia crossed with a rosea. And it's a really a neat little plant. Nice color to it with the green contrast. The spines are very large and tend to stand out. But it makes a nice plant. And it has some color forms that really are attractive. It also threw out some sports, and this one is called Stars and Stripes. Now there's another Neo Stars and Stripes that's a big Elmore cross, or it may be Stripes and Stars, or it's very close. But if you see one that looks like a Heliacum, it was a Moriana that sported to the variegated form. So you've got those nice contrasts and variegation. There are two forms that are found in nature that are named as far as the botanists are concerned, and they're cultivars or cultivated varieties of Eleutheropetala. If you're familiar with the old Grande magazine from back in the 70s, fantastic magazine with pictures. It was so special when that thing first came out, and then after 4 issues it was gone, as well as my subscription. But I think we ended up getting a year's subscription to Flower and Garden or something. They made a deal after they shut down Grande. That was after a year. But this was called Neoregelia Sunburst. It was pictured in the old Grande catalog, and Herb Hill had it in his plant list back in 1979. I haven't seen it since the late 70s, so I really don't know what its status is, if anybody's still growing it. Another one, two of my Texas buddies, John Anderson, who's passed away, and R.L. Frazier, were aimlessly wandering around Ecuador, and they came across this plant on a fence post. And after several beers and much discussion, they decided on the name fence post. And so that's what they call this form of Eleutheropetala. On the FCBS, they have this picture as Eleutheropetala, fence post also. And I don't think that that's the case. I think that this is probably more like a brown recluse or a different hybrid of Eleutheropetala. I don't think it shows me any of the characteristics that this does, which I know is one of the Texas fence posts. This is an Eleutheropetala crossed with a pendula. This is a pendula crossed with an Eleutheropetala. There's a lot of difference there. This is another form of Eleutheropetala crossed with pendula. So there's a lot of different forms. And in my collection, I've got a Morona by Eleutheropetala, a Pendula by Eleutheropetala bicolor, a Pendula by Eleutheropetala, a Pendula by Rosea, a Moriana by Eleutheropetala, and several of those rascals you can't tell apart without the label. So there's a lot of sort of intermingling here amongst these things. Recently, there's been also a bigeneric from Thailand. This one's called Neomia Good Remembrance. We know a bigeneric is two different genera that are crossed. So a Neoregelia crossed with an Acmea mixes together and turns into a Neomia. And that's what the X in front of the Neomia means. The X tells you that it's a bigeneric. So it's a cross that a fellow in Thailand did between Moriana and Acmea Black, which is a Chantinia. Both of these plants live in the Amazonian area under the same conditions. So, you know, I feel comfortable the way the pup comes off, the general look of the plant, it looks like it's a good bigeneric cross. Now, I know we probably need the lights back on, but if you've got a few more minutes, I'd like to show you a couple of the plants that we've been looking at in pictures, if that's all right. Here's our pendula. When we think about a pendula and the plant in the heliacum, this is what we think about. Really, really a neat, and these all are coming from this mother right here. They're not multiple plants or anything, but it's extremely attractive, I think.
Looks like that.
And I want to show you exactly why I'm considered an expert. This is a pendula also. When you got thousands of plants and you try to put them all in a greenhouse that's 24 foot by 48 foot, sometimes things fall and get underneath things. And you almost have to stand at the door because it's so crowded and water from the front door back 48 feet. If it gets cold and doesn't get watered, I will guarantee you can make a plant look just like this. And that's really a shame. I almost cried. But since I became an expert, I don't cry anymore. I just count my money and see if I can afford to buy another one. But my daughter said, "Hey, what in the world did you stick that in for?" Comic relief, sweetheart. That's the reason I had you, and that's why. That didn't go over too good, but since I got a babysit next week, she can't make any choices there. This is a brown recluse. Again, the red in the blues against the white. I mean, it almost doesn't get any better than that, but I got one that does. Now this is a brown recluse. This is a pendula, variety pendula. Now they are different, but it may take some imagination to see it. But that's what this is. Now I talked about the variegated and albomarginated pendulas. You can see the variegation in that one, and you can see the white edges or the albomargination in the puff coming off of this one. So you've got albomarginated and variegated forms of the pendula. Okay, this is Morona crossed with Eleptropetala, and this, well, they both are. You know, it's the same cross, but you can see the typical growth patterns that the plants have. This is Morona crossed with Eleptropetala. They're both the same plant. But you can see how this flattens out when it blooms, and it's more upright before it blooms, like most of your neos do. I'll show you some pictures of the rosea. And this is Neo Rosea. I had it on the show table, pictures. This is mounted, and it makes just a lovely mount. And when it's mounted, At my house, it doesn't get as much water as it really should, so it's a tighter plant than when I grow it in a pot. So it's grown harder, basically. And of course, this is one of our favorites. This is ludicrous, Chester's plant. But it's hard to beat. There's no doubt about it. The colors in it, the form that the plant takes, it's just, if it were purple instead of pink, it's the only thing that could make it better. Now for just some commercialization, I do have a few plants that came from Louisiana. And I have a pendula and the variegated. That's the only one I brought. I have to get it for Sarasota tomorrow night. So these plants are available if anybody wants to see me. I enjoyed my trip over, and I'd like to just see what questions do you have about the affiliate. Yes, sir.
Yeah, when you're starting the pups, do you find it's best to start them in mix or on wood?
Depends on how you're going to grow them finally, and the size that you take them off. If you take a pup off, like the size of these, you can mount them directly with no problems at all. Or you can pot them, either one. If you were taking something small off, you can go ahead and pot it. But they're going to grow the most roots on a mount when they're young plants. As the plants get older, they tend to root a lot less on mounts. So you want to mount them tightly, whatever you're mounting them on, so they don't wiggle around. And they'll root, but you can mount what you're going to mount just as small as you're comfortable with taking them off with no problem. I think a very loose mix, growing them in a basket, giving them good air movement is really another key. And because they're coming from the Amazon basin, they tend to get persnickety about water quality. So if you have some water problems, then you might want to reserve your rainwater for them. If you can grow the Guzmanias and Bericias and stuff like that without any water problems, then that's no problem for these either. But if you've got something nasty in your water, these will tell you right away you shouldn't have used it on. Yes, ma'am?
Speaking of water, are they salt tolerant? Because we have salt intrusion in the well.
I don't have that problem, but I would really think they are not going to be. They're in the Andes side, of South America. They're not growing near the beach like a lot of your deos do. I wouldn't class them with cruetas and all the stuff that has more salt tolerance. And this is fairly pure water that they're coming from. I would say your typical thing, put an extra 5-gallon bucket out for the rain and water them out of that, would be my personal advice. You can always kill it and then you become an expert. Yes, sir.
Could you do a little synopsis of what's involved with the hybridization? Is that beyond the homeowner?
Oh, no, not at all. You have to have patience.
Excuse my ignorance, but
You have to have patience and space, basically. And what you've got to do is you've got to have the flowers of the two plants. I would say for the novice,